Good morning and welcome to How to Manage and Motivate for Better Performance. Welcome to those of you that may be attending one of these webinars for the first time, and welcome back to those of you that have become now regular attendees at these webinars. So, as I say, this morning we are here to talk about how to manage and motivate for better performance. Before we get started, I'm just going to walk through a few things for those of you that are attending for the first time. And that is just simply how to use Crowdcast. So to begin with, even if I start with the chat box, I'm just going to highlight how the chat box works. And I would like if you could use the chat box this morning. Those of you that have attended these webinars before will know that I do like the sessions to be interactive. And so I'll be asking some questions. I'd hope that you will populate those in the chat box. I haven't any polls running this morning, but if you do have questions, I would ask you to use the Ask a Question box. Really, if there are questions in the chat box and if it's active, I could potentially miss some of those questions. So it'd be good if you could populate those there. And what you will see is at the bottom of the screen, book your 30-minute complimentary session. So consultation, if you're interested in having a chat with me after the webinar, please feel free to use that link. It will take you through to an online booking system for you to book that complimentary consultation. So please feel free to get in touch if you have questions or queries following the webinar. And you also have a 15-second clip moment for those of you that like to use social media and want to share some of what you're hearing. Please feel free to use that. So we have a few people attending. These webinars are live and I am recording them. So though there will be a number of people will be watching these on demand. And so if that's the case and you're watching it on demand, then you won't be able to use the chat box. I'd love to hear from you that have joined this morning. If you're willing, introduce yourself, even just good morning, and I can see the names of those attending, but feel free to use the chat box and let's get the conversation started. So in terms of today, I'm going to just introduce myself, but while I'm giving you a little bit of time to get started with the chat box, what I would like to do is to hear from you in the chat box around why are you here this morning? Why is motivating and managing for better performance, why is that a topic that you are interested in? What is it what are your issues? What is it that you want to know and find out this morning? So while you're doing that, I'll get started with a little bit about myself, why I'm here today and what I'd like to talk about. So some of you on the webinar this morning will know me. I've perhaps done some work in your organizations. I have spent over 20 years as a business improvement specialist. And currently the key services are around improving psychological flexibility. You'll hear me talk about a lot of that during these webinars. I'll talk about that again this morning briefly. Also creating psychologically safe workplaces. That I'm not going to spend too much time on this morning, but actually creating psychologically safe workplaces is really key in terms of managing and motivating employees. I also use two assessments, both owned by Thomas International. One is the Trait Emotional Intelligence Questionnaire, which assesses an individual's emotional intelligence. And the second is the Personality Profile Assessment, which assesses how people behave at work. And that's some of what I'm going to talk about today is the PPA. And really how you might just use that in terms of having a general understanding of behaviour and people's behavioural style. And I also, for organisations, provide some strategic planning support, particularly around an organisation's purpose, vision and values and strategic objectives. All of these relate to the conversation today about managing and motivating for better performance. So if we just move into really some of the areas of focus for this morning. I see those attending so far shy in terms of the chat box. Please feel free to use the chat box. Let me know why you're here. You'll really be surprised at those other individuals that are also attending that they're probably here for very similar reasons. So the key areas of focus today in terms of managing and motivating for better performance are to talk about the personality types, behavioural styles, and how to manage then those individuals for better performance, having understood those personality types. So a little bit about why I'm here. And I say, great, the chat box has started. So COVID has had a huge impact on volunteers due to the increased volume of work. Thank you, Audrey. That's something that I'm definitely going to highlight. Just about to come on to that, as you will see. Some pointers on to assist with motivating people, please. Okay, so in terms of why we're here, why I'm having this conversation today, and that is because of a variety of things that are going on. The research I have at the top of this slide is from Gallup, and it's certainly nothing new. This research has been around for a number of years, and we know the findings of it. And that is Gallup surveyed 2 million employees across 700 organisations. And what they identified is people don't leave jobs, they leave managers. So why are we having this conversation today is because the manager is key in terms of the motivation and the performance of the individual. And they have more influence over that performance than potentially they may realise. And so they identified that an employee's time in a business and their productivity is directly related to the relationship with their immediate supervisor. So the relationship that you have with your employees is going to directly impact on their performance. So the reason that we're here today is to get better performance through better management and motivation of those employees that work within your team. What I have also highlighted here, just in terms of, well, why are you here? What's in it for you? What are the things that you need to consider as the leader of the team, is recent research that came out in the last couple of weeks from the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, that's the professional body in the UK for HR professionals, really has identified the top stress being one of the top 3 causes of both long-term and short-term absence. But what they identified was the cause of the stress. And what you'll see here in terms of percentages, so 59% was around workload. And Audrey, I think that highlights the point that you've made. So the impact that COVID has had on the increased volume of work. Management style is 32%. COVID and the challenges around COVID and home working is 31%. And then the non-work factors, relationship and family, is 25%. So really what we see here is the manager can impact on the majority of it. We even looked at the 80-20 rule, is you could impact on 80% of the causes of stress within the workplace. So Gallup again, the chief executive and chairman of Gallup, they would believe that you as a leader and manager in an organisation has more impact on your health and your employees' health than your doctor. So we as individuals can control our own health, but you as a leader, you can see in terms of the CIPD research is highlighting here that you absolutely have an impact on your team's well-being, because you potentially, I use the word potentially, have control over the workload and the volume of work. That may not be the case at the moment, but you can do something about your management style. So it is thinking about you and how you conduct yourself in work. And really, I think in terms of management and leadership, this quote is particularly useful in thinking about managing and motivating individuals. And that is, in the past, jobs were about muscles. It was about the production line. Now they're about brains, so it's about intelligence. But in the future, they'll be about heart. And so the question here really for you is, are you creating the conditions within the workplace, and that the workplace currently may be remote working, but are you creating the conditions for your team for them to be able to bring their best selves to work? And that is the key challenge in terms of motivating and managing performance, is, am I creating those conditions to enable people to bring their best selves to work? Really, in terms of, if we think about the muscle and the brains, when you recruit people, you are recruiting people, you are testing through the recruitment process that they have the knowledge, skills and experience to be able to do the job. So we hope we've covered the muscles and the brains. But in terms of the heart, the behaviour and the attitude, have you tested it? Are you testing it? Are you using any assessments to do that? Because quite often people in organisations perhaps just simply don't fit. They haven't got the connection with the values in the organisation. There may be a conflict with those, and simply their behavioural style doesn't work for the organisation. So testing those can be really useful. If we manage and motivate people for improved performance, then what we will hopefully have, if we've got a well-managed and motivated team, we'll have improved teamwork and performance, improved levels of innovation, which is key in this very fast pace that we're working in today. There will be, if we take it back to the stress coming from managers and organisations, that means that stress will be reduced, absenteeism will be reduced as a result of a better managed and motivated workforce. Loyalty and satisfaction will also increase because the manager's relationship with the individual is connected to satisfaction, loyalty and engagement with the manager. And also then reputation as an employer will be improved. And in today's world, attracting good people with the right skills, knowledge and attitude to your team is critical. And so what you want is to be able to attract the key people with the right skills and knowledge, so reputation being key in all of that. So the first step in terms of managing and motivating performance is about, as a leader, knowing thyself. So again, I'd like you to get involved with the chat box again, and perhaps let's look at, what have you done as a leader to get to know yourself better? If we look at everything that we've been talking about, the last webinar that I did was on avoiding burnout. And if we look at avoiding burnout, one of the keys back to the stress is your leadership skills are key in terms of avoiding that burnout in the workplace. So what have you done to know yourself? Are you aware of your behavioural style? Are you aware of your impact on others? Do you know your work strengths? Do you know what behavioural challenges that you have? And are you self-aware? So are you aware of your own emotions? Are you aware of your response to those? Are you aware of the emotions of others within your team? Are you noticing what's showing up for individuals within your team? And are you noticing your response to those emotions? And all of that is key, and I'll be coming back to know thyself later towards the end of the webinar to recap on everything that we've talked about this morning and how we might use that. So I see we're shy in terms of the chat box still, but please feel free to jot down what you might have done to know yourself better. How are you going about doing that? Have you participated in coaching? Have you participated in some self-assessments around emotional intelligence or behavioural style? Or have you participated in 360 feedback to create that awareness? So we want to know ourselves better in terms of managing and motivating performance, because we want to know where we are motivating, where we're demotivating, where we're perhaps adding some stress to individuals or the team. So really then, in terms of the next step, and this links even to knowing thyself, is to know others. And knowing others, what I'm going to do this morning is to talk through this model owned by Thomas International, the PPA, which is based on Marston's disc theory. And Marston's disc theory then, this model is based on people being mapped on two axes, which we can see on this matrix. And with the two axes, we can plot people dependent on people's attention being either active or passive. And also then they're being active or passive dependent on the individual's perception of the environment. And what you'll see here is that environment being either hostile, unfriendly and antagonistic, or friendly and favourable. So really what we can see here now is there are 4 personality types, which I'm going to talk through. And the key in, first of all, knowing thyself is to understand what your personality type might be. So I'll be walking through each of these now. So we'll all have a preference that we will revert to in the workplace. But we will dip in and out of all 4. But really the key here is, in terms of knowing yourself, is the ability to be more flexible in terms of that preference. The ability to be able to change your behaviour dependent on those individuals that you are trying to manage and to motivate. So if we start with dominance, is the preferred style here being dominance, we see in terms of the matrix. So dominance produces activity in an antagonistic, hostile and unfriendly environment. Influence then produces, again, activity in a friendly and favourable environment this time. And steadiness produces then passivity in a friendly and favourable environment. And compliance then produces passivity in a hostile, unfriendly and antagonistic environment. So people who are people who are proactive, reactive, they will make things happen. They are externalizers and they will get their energy from external sources. Those people who are passive will be reactive, they'll be analytical, and they are really great in finance and support roles, even such as IT, or great even in the legal profession, because it's their attention to detail. So what I'm going to do now is to talk through all 4 of these. But even to begin with now, what I'd like you to do is And knowing what I've talked about even so far is, what do you believe is your preferred style? How do you behave in work? And perhaps, do you believe that you have the ability to change your behavioural style and dip in and out of those dependent on who you're dealing with or working with? So if we start with then high dominance. So the high dominance people, either yourselves as leader or those on your team, they will drive to accomplish results in spite of opposition or antagonistic circumstances. That won't be the same for everyone. So the high dominance people, in terms of their drive to accomplish results, they will be assertive, they'll be competitive, they'll be direct, they'll be driving, forceful, they'll be inquisitive, and they'll also be a self-starter. So the question that now comes up for you as a leader is, well, what does that mean for you? Even now, what I'd like you to do is to consider, are there members of your team who you can associate with being very assertive and competitive and direct? And think about, even for a moment, in terms of you leading these individuals, when they're assertive and competitive and direct and forceful or inquisitive, for example, how does that make you feel? What shows up for you? And then how are you responding to that? I'm going to come back and gather some of that information as we go through the webinar. So what shows up for you when you're dealing with those individuals, and how do you respond to that? What might I see you doing? So in terms of high dominance, these individuals will expect freedom and will want to work independently. So what you will see in terms of their behaviour, they may try to take over, they may interrupt conversations, they may be restless and impatient. What is it that you will need to do to manage and to motivate those individuals for better performance? Is you will need to let them discover things for themselves, because they like that freedom and independence. You will need to focus on the business and focus on results and performance, because that's what's driving them. They're competitive. So competitiveness is about the facts and the figures. So when you're having a debate, don't argue about feelings. You need to argue about the facts, because that's what they will be over. They will know their facts and figures, because that's what they will take pride in. That's what gives them that boost. And you will need to negotiate with them. Those individuals, if you want to get the best out of them, then you need to not tell them what to do. You need to give them that freedom. Remember earlier I said, are you creating the conditions to enable your team members, those individuals on your team, to bring their best selves to work? So it's about understanding the individual style, preferred style, and also considering what you can do to for your advantage and the individual's advantage to enable them to bring their best selves to work. And so that's these do's and don'ts. So don't give too much detail and too many rules, because they like the freedom, they don't want to be confined. However, we all need boundaries, and that's important in terms of the organisation and keeping some consistency. And don't take too long to do things, because high dominance individuals will make quick decisions. But again, we've got to strike a balance with all of this. So there we've started with the high dominance and thinking about, do you have individuals on your team who are high dominance? Maybe even in the chat box, you'd like to include now, considering, again, if we I just come back on the slides here, and thinking about the characteristics of those people who are high dominance. Thinking about the behaviours, so what will I see happening, what will I hear happening, and then think about what are some of the challenges that you have even in dealing with those individuals. Please feel free to include those in the chat box. High influence then. So moving into high influence, these are people who like to influence people to act positively and favourably. Influencing people is what they get a kick out of, what they enjoy, what motivates them. So these individuals are communicative, they are friendly, they are influential, they're a real networker, they're persuasive, they're positive, and they're verbal. So those are the people that you will see having conversations with other team members. They'll be trying to influence you, perhaps even as the leader. They're the people that you'll see networking within the room. And so knowing a little bit then about the characteristics and influencing being one of the things that they want to do to act positively and favourably, then what would we see or hear these individuals doing within the team? They will be very enthusiastic and friendly. There'll be lots of hand movements, so there'll be lots of the non-verbals. And these are people who will be interested in telling stories, because telling stories is part of the influencing strategy and the networking and getting people on board. What you will do then, what you'll need to do with these people is to talk to them. Talk about their opinions and their ideas, because they want you to listen. Ask how they're feeling. So we're coming into the emotions again. Summarising in writing perhaps what's been agreed. You'll really need to recognise these individuals and the ideas that they have. So high influence people, recognition is something that really does motivate them. So recognising those ideas and also giving them the opportunity then to build relationships. Even in a one-to-one with these individuals is spending time at the start of the one-to-one to get to know the individual, ask how they're feeling and what's going on with their other relationships. So high influencers like the freedom of speech, but they'll rarely consider their impact on others. And they set out to establish personal relationships with everyone. So again, what you'll want to do is to not argue with these individuals, is to try to talk about facts without the feelings, allow them to lose respect or self-worth. So it's these are the don'ts. So don't talk about the facts without the feelings, because the emotions are what matter. Allow them to lose their self-respect or self-worth, because that's how they see themselves to be viewed by others, and that would have a really detrimental impact on those people with a high influence style within the workplace. Okay, so moving on then into high steadiness. So high steadiness individuals are steadiness in performing work to consistently produce in a predictable manner. So consistency is key with the high steadiness. So those are people who are amiable, deliberate in what they do. They're dependable. They're good listeners. They're kind individuals. They're methodical in terms of the work that they do. They're persistent and they're thorough. And those are all people that we need within our organisation. So those high steadiness people work well within a team. They value convention and consistency. And however, that can produce insecurity really within others. And they want freedom from tight deadlines and pressure. So if we think about here the observable behaviours that we'll see, is the kindness. These people are good listeners. They're relaxed and kind in terms of their style and approach. However, these people don't like change for change's sake, so they'll be resistant to change, and they are non-aggressive. So you can see even the high steadiness and how these people could potentially cause conflict with other preferred styles within the team. So what you want to do here is to use a steady pace with these individuals because they don't like the pressure and for things to be rushed. Ask questions and listen. Be interested in him or her as a person. Support their ideas and offer guarantees. Because if you can't offer guarantees, that's going to create insecurity for the high steadiness individuals. So that's difficult in today's world. So you can imagine what how those individuals will be feeling. But you need to be offering some guarantees in terms of the work perhaps that they are producing or the work that they need to do. And it's don't introduce then rapid change without the facts and the figures and all the background information that needs to go with it. And don't change routine or the environment because you will see demotivation popping in. And don't rush them. So high steadiness, again, we need to consider how those members of the team impact on others. What's showing up for you now with the high steadiness? In terms of leadership, it might be that a little bit of irritation shows up when you're dealing with individuals who resist change, who are non-aggressive, who you don't feel are really pushing themselves forward. So it's noticing what's showing up for you, and again, how you respond to that, how you develop relationships with these individuals, or whether you don't. And so the high compliance then individuals, these are people compliance with policy and standards to avoid error, conflict, and danger. So high compliance individuals are needed in every organisation because those are people who are into accuracy, who are careful, who are compliant, who are logical, who are perfectionists, who are precise and systematic. Those are individuals that help keep us right, help keep us within the rules of the business and compliance. So what will we see in terms of observable behaviours? So these people will write notes. They'll be very precise. They'll be very cautious about expressing feelings. In fact, you might find it very difficult to read these individuals. And they'll ask for information and detail. So what you'll need to do is to work with these individuals, you'll need to be systematic and organised in terms of your communications and your interactions. You'll need to list the advantages and disadvantages because that's what they do. You'll need to give them things in writing, and you'll need to provide proof again of perhaps change or things that need to be done, business cases for them to be able to make that leap. Again, with this individual, you'll not be able to rush decisions with them. You won't be able to make sudden changes. You won't be able to leave out details because that will cause suspicion. And you need not be too general. So you'll need to have all your facts and figures in front of you. And in terms of those 4 styles, I've said the 4 styles are based on Marston's DISC theory, which is used for Thomas International's personal profile assessment. And for those of you that are interested in finding out a little bit more about your own preferred style, you back to know yourself. Now what we're going to do is to start to pull some of the common threads together that we've talked about so far. Is you can have your own assessment done. It's an 8-minute assessment with 24 questions. And that provides information on your fears, motivators, values, and behavioural style. The tool, Thomas International's personal profile analysis, is registered with the British Psychological Society and audited against the European Federation of Psychologists Association. So it's a valid and reliable tool. And what I'd like to show you here are, you will see on the screen now, you will see 3 graphs. I'm going to start on the right hand side, the graph on the first right, self-image. So when you do a personality profile analysis, you will get these three graphs. The first graph shows the self-image. So we've got the D, I, S, and C, the dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. So what we can see here is this individual's self-image, their preferred style is the I. They are an influencer. The next is dominance. The least is steadiness. And the next after that is compliance. So self-image is you as an individual. And that's just you, how you normally behave. And then if we move left, starting at the far left with the work mask, the work mask now shows in the report how you adapt your style when in work. So this is interesting to see the changes that we as an individual make in terms of our own preferred style and how we change, or some would say the mask that we might wear in terms of work. So here what we have, we can see the influencing is still high, the dominance is still low, slightly lower in work than it would be in the self-image. And again, the steadiness being low, but the compliance moving up. And perhaps that's because of the requirements of the role or the organisation that they work in. So the compliance has moved from below the line to above the line. And then the graph in the middle is the behaviour under pressure. So how do you adapt your style when you're under pressure? The question then with pressure is, what does that look like for you? What does pressure look like? How often does that happen? So you can see the change here in terms of the behavioural style. So the influencing is still the preferred style. Just look at then how the dominance has jumped up. So the individual will be more dominant under pressure, still a low steadiness, but compliance really drops. So all of this is key in understanding is, how do I respond in work? How do I respond under pressure? What impact does that have on me? What impact does that have on my team? What impact is that having on the organisation? So before I start trying to pull some of this together, I'd be interested, great, we've got a question in the chat box. So how is this different? Okay, very similar in terms of MB, yeah, so the Myers-Briggs is you have preferred styles. So you're getting a preferred style here, and so similar in terms of it's a different assessment tool with a different style of report, but all of these reports will highlight both the positives and the negatives in terms of your preferred style. So they're another psychometric test. And I do encourage individuals to either have a PPA conducted, or some of you may have even participated on the emotional intelligence. So you think about the quote about the brains and the muscles, and now it's all about heart. So a lot that I've talked about this morning relates back even to emotions and our interactions, which is all around our emotional intelligence. And that's what I'm going to try and pull together now. So what I'd like to know from you is, any further questions that you might have at this point in terms of the personality styles and what that might mean to how you might manage and motivate those people. But what I will I'll do is I'm going to come to using the ACT matrix, which many of you, if you've attended these workshops, webinars, I should say, before, have heard me talk about. So I'm now going to use this ACT matrix to start to pull together what we've talked about, to think about what is it that you need to do as a leader to manage and motivate for better performance. So the ACT matrix, we'll see again, two axes, similar to the axis that we've just talked about with the DISC theory. And what I'm just going to do is at the top of the matrix here, we have the 5 senses experiencing world. So what I see or hear, touch, taste, or smell in the world. So it's the external experience. Down at the bottom of this line, then we have the internal experiencing, the internal world. So when we see or hear things, in today's context, I'm talking about the workplace because we're talking about managing and motivating for better performance. And so we've got 5 senses. So what do I see or hear in the workplace? That flows through me. It creates internal experiences in the internal world. I'm asking you to notice what you see or hear in the workplace, what then is created internally for you in the internal world. And then on the other side of the axis, we have relief and satisfaction. So what do I do that gives me satisfaction, and what do I do that gives me relief from? In terms of just asking those questions, in terms of this is you as an individual. You as an individual in the organisation, managing and motivating for better performance. If we start in the internal world, thinking about what you've just heard, who is important in terms of managing and motivating for better performance? So this is where I definitely need your help in the chat box. Who do you think is important? I'll get started just while you get typing. So who is important in terms of managing and motivating for better performance? First of all, it's self. If you remember, we talked about know thyself. So you are important in terms of managing and motivating for better performance. It's colleagues are most definitely important in terms of this context. And in terms of managing and motivating, I think, that family and friends pops in here too, because when you're not managing and motivating in the way that you think you would like to be, then you are likely to be impacting at home or with friends. For example, you may be talking about these things. So next question is, so what's important to you in terms of managing and motivating? So you as a leader, what's important in terms of you as a leader? What do you value in terms of your own leadership? How you want to come across to your colleagues? What are the things that you value in terms of you managing and motivating? I'm going to put some examples here. So you might value being approachable. You might value being honest. You might value being direct. You might value being transparent. You might value pride in your work. You might value, depending on the role, accuracy. So again, please don't be shy. Feel free to use the chat box. What is it you value in terms of your own leadership style? You need to know yourself. You need to know what is important to you as a leader. And well, actually, the other one that I'm going to add in, considering what we talked about in the introductions, is your health. You need to value your health, and that whole self-care is something that we would do, and perhaps in terms of health. So these are things that you are saying who and what's important in the internal world. And now what we want to do is to move to the bottom left in the internal world. So if we think about managing and motivating for improved performance, then the question here is, what unwanted stuff is showing up from you that you want to move away from? Great, thank you, Laura, brilliant. So fairness and ability to do the job. Okay, which is also going to relate into the sense of pride. So thank you, Laura and Adri. Just going to fit that onto the page. Brilliant. So now I want you to tell me what unwanted stuff is showing up inside that you'd prefer not to experience when it comes to managing and motivating the team. I'm going to get started again with you just to say that these are common feelings that leaders will feel when they consider managing and motivating performance. So there can be frustration showing up. There can be irritation showing up. There could be, sorry, I'll just fix that. Irritation. Okay. And there may be anger showing up. So again, using the chat box, I'd love to hear what shows up for you when you're thinking about managing and motivating the team. It could be that you feel under pressure. I don't have time for this because we've talked about the impact and the workloads in terms of COVID. And one of the things that we know that leaders have an impact on all of that. So you may also be feeling that sense of feeling under pressure with this is something that I simply don't have time for. So that could be a thought. I don't have time. So anything else that you feel might be showing up when you think about managing and motivating? It's the unwanted stuff that's showing up. Things that you would prefer not to experience. Okay, what we have at the moment gives us a good starting point even already with some of the examples that I have included. Okay, so at the top left then of the matrix, the question is, in the external world, what do I do when I want to get rid of the unwanted stuff? So when you feel frustration, irritation, anger, or under pressure, I may see you, or I may hear you cut people off. Now, if you have a preferred style where you want to talk things through and where you need all the facts, and you don't like to be rushed, then cutting people off is going to have a negative impact on the motivation of those members. You may avoid conversations. So you may avoid conversations, for example, with high dominance because you think they're argumentative. So avoiding conversations is something that you might do, or you might keep conversations strictly task related, dependent on your own preferred behavioural style. You might set high standards that can be perceived as unrealistic. So in emotional intelligence, we talk about your levels of self-motivation. So if you're internally motivated, then you'll set your own high standards. You'll set high standards for others. And the problem with that is they will feel that good is never good enough because you set standards that they perceive to be high and unrealistic. You may argue with individuals and you may tell people what to do rather than involving them and empowering those individuals. So the thing to remember for those of you that have attended before, for those of you that this is the first time, is this is a consequence of this, and often then we get this cycle. So what we can see here is, as a result of feeling the frustration, the irritation, the anger, and under pressure, and I don't have time, the internal self-chat. So I don't have the, yeah, okay, great. So I don't have the necessary resources. I don't have the necessary resources within the chat box, and I'd missed that. So that's a thought. So these are things in the internal world that we are experiencing. As a result of that, we will do something as a result. It might mean that we don't have those conversations with the people that we need to have around those resources. It might mean that when we are angry, we cut people off and we argue with them. But when we cut people off and we argue with them, then perhaps we reflect on how we behave, or people have conversations with us afterwards about how we behave. And so that can leave us with a feeling of guilt. It can leave us with a feeling of incompetence. And so we will then do something in relation to that as a result of those feelings. So if we want to manage and motivate for better performance, what is it that we as leaders then need to do? What could we do that would move us towards who is important? In this case, yourself, managing and motivating. If we can manage and motivate, it is much easier for you as individuals. But also, it's about moving towards those colleagues that you are managing, because that will make life easier for them if they are feeling satisfaction, if they are feeling motivated and feeling that they are able to bring their best selves to work. So what could you do to move towards who is important? So what I'd say is back to the know thyself. And what I'd encourage you to do is to find time to use the ACT matrix to notice. So what you could do after this webinar today is to commit to today, is to notice what is showing up for you. So notice what's showing up right here, right now. For many of you perhaps attending that feel that you need to attend this, but there are other things that you might need to be doing. So what is it I need to do from today? Is spend time noticing the internal and external world, what it feels like to move away or towards satisfaction and relief. Also then we could notice the impact we have on others. And that might be get some feedback. That could be feedback through assessments like the PPA or the TQ. It could be from colleagues. So from colleagues is the stop, start, and continue. So it's asking the members of the team for 3 things that they'd like to see you stop doing, 3 things they'd like you to start doing, and 3 things they'd like to see you continue doing. So asking, perhaps you're brave enough to ask everybody on the team for that. And that will really give you a good understanding then of yourself. If you're going to manage and motivate for better performance, it's about develop your own leadership style. And it could also be to use assessments to understand the team. So that if you do the PPA, for example, for the entire team, you've got a clear idea around whose preferred style is dominance, influence, steadiness, and compliance. Then you've got the concrete evidence that you need in terms of how do I adapt my style. So adapting your style dependent on the individual's preferred style to really motivate and manage them well. One of the things in terms of managing and motivating for better performance, I think for all 4 styles, is to provide clarity on the purpose of the organisation and also the purpose of the team. So why are we here? What do we exist to do? What benefit do we bring? So provide clarity on that purpose and setting then clear expectations. So we talked about the high dominance. High dominance likes the freedom, but you need to set expectations and the boundaries, and then you need to give them that freedom to be able to get on and achieve the goals and targets. And it's also about recognition. So it's remembering to recognize the workload that people are working their way through at the moment. And I think, it is that thing around, well, if the workload has increased, and that's definitely an overwhelming sense that I am getting from people that I'm working with, either in teams or through a coaching environment, is people are starting to feel, and perhaps that's something I'll put down here in the bottom left, is overwhelmed. So what we need to do is to look at the schedule and the workload and have conversations with the team about how we can make that more manageable. Look for ideas and suggestions, because again, there'll be members of the team who will have ideas and suggestions, and they'll want you to listen to those ideas. What do they see in terms of ways to be more efficient and effective in terms of the work that you do within your team or within the organization? So those are some very simple suggestions to get you started in terms of managing and motivating for better performance. So get to know yourself, get to know your team members, perhaps using that PPA assessment. As I mentioned earlier, at the bottom of the screen, what you'll see is the ability to book a 30-minute free consultation with myself. As I said, if you click that link, it will take you through to an online booking system, and it will allow you to book that consultation, is to have a discussion around some of the things that are burning issues perhaps for you. And what I'd like to do is thank you for attending today. I hope what I've told you, you found useful and valuable. You've taken an hour out of your schedule to be able to do that. Feel free to get in touch. I've provided here my website, which will contain some resources, free resources again, an email address, telephone number, and feel free to follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and also if you follow us on Crowdcast, you will be notified in advance of the event starting, just in case you're not on the distribution list. But once you sign up on a Crowdcast, you'll be instantly added to my distribution list. So we have just a couple of minutes to go before we come to 11 o'clock. I'd love to hear from you again in the chat box around how did you find the session? How did you find the webinar? What information was really useful to you? So what worked well for you? What's been useful? And is there anything that you feel that you would like to know moving forward? All of that's really useful for me to know in terms of looking at future webinars. So I'm hoping I'm going to hear from you in the chat box. Great. Audrey, brilliant. Okay, so love the idea of the three. Yeah, 3 things to stop, start, continue. That's something that you can go away and do today. Create that awareness about what do your team think of you? What are the things that work for them? What don't? And so that will really help. I think that will give you that insight. Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, Audrey. If anybody else is willing to share, please do so in the chat box, or again, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you for joining us. I hope everybody continues to stay well. Thank you, Michael. Thank you for the compliment. Always good to hear how people enjoyed the session. Thank you. Stay well. Have a great day. And I look forward to hearing you at the next webinar. I'll be in touch.